effort to solve these problems together?
So when we first started selling Spot, we imagined what would be a misuse of the robot that we ought to prevent, right in the terms and conditions of sale. And what occurred to us, that we've seen the science fiction movies that you have, is we need to prohibit weaponization. We do not want this robot used with a weapon on board or to harm or intimidate anyone. And so that's right in our terms and conditions. But then, maybe not to our surprise, there were these viral videos of people doing exactly that with other companies' robots, and it caused a huge understandable outcry and fear and concern, not just among the public, but also in the robotics industry. So we issued a letter with a few other companies and then started working with lawmakers to prohibit the weaponization of commercial civilian robots, setting aside military systems that have been around for a long time. We were focused on these increasingly accessible and available robots that we envision are going to be everywhere, doing all kinds of great things for all of us. So we've been working in California, Massachusetts, and here in New York with lawmakers who've introduced a bill that we helped develop that would prohibit weaponization of a robot. We almost got there in California. We did have a veto from the governor on the interesting issue of should police departments be allowed to use less lethal weapons, such as tasers, on board a robot. I don't have an answer to that, but that is the issue we need to try to work through next year. It's an interesting one, and maybe you can think about pros and cons to get involved if you're in California, or in New York when that bill comes around hopefully next year. So for us, we proactively try to think of things that might be a concern, an understandable, legitimate concern, and try to work. My role is to work with lawmakers to try to resolve it. And we're getting closer. Hopefully next year we'll have one or maybe three pieces of legislation that do that.
I think that's the way to go, really. Ultimately, one of the biggest risks that you will find from an operational perspective anyway, is that legal risk. And that's where we come in and we can help navigate all that. But ultimately, you're looking at, if it's a physical embodiment, we're talking about things like product liability, as we've discussed before, when things go wrong. And this can be where harm occurs where it was foreseen, such as cure systems in industrials where it's accidentally injured a person if it's foreseen, or where it's being used in a way that hasn't been previously intended or contemplated, and because of that, we're then into the nitty-gritty of the plaintiff bar and going through disclosures, we're going through discovery, the whole works, the things that drag on and really cost organizations a lot of money. So I think the best way to approach this has been, and again, people will disagree with me, having a clear legal structure that determines who is responsible for what happens when something goes wrong, what sort of redress can then come from this, and whether that's strict liability where you're definitely going to be on the hook, or whether it's a more soft version. But ultimately, having those rules in place will mean that not only organizations know what the rules of the game, but also the people that get harmed, they have this clear process of redress. I think we're going to need that in some way, shape, or form.
So yeah, I agree with all of that, the governance structures and frameworks. But I think one of the biggest challenges really is a lack of trust. I think society generally doesn't trust robots because they've been, if you look at pop culture, robots have been villainized and demonized over time. So the bad actor is always the robot, or generally the robot. But there are some, obviously. I think in your presentation earlier today, you were talking about the good robots as well. So I think it's this lack of trust, and it's really a matter of perception. So I think just reframing that the value proposition, but of course there are bad actors who are using the robots for nefarious purposes. So you are going to absolutely see that trust deficit. That is something we do need to sort of build.
Wow, amazing. Well, we're almost done. Well, I want to follow up with another